Chapter XV Pythagoras cured by medicine and music. Pythagoras conceived that the first attention that should be given to men should be addressed to the senses, as when one perceives beautiful figures and forms or hears beautiful rhythms and melodies. Consequently, he laid down that the first erudition was that which subsists through music's melodies and rhythms, and from these he obtained remedies of human manners and passions. Excuse me, and restored the pristine harmony of the faculties of the soul. Moreover, he devised medicines calculated to repress and cure the diseases of both bodies and souls. There is also, by heavens, something which deserves to be mentioned above all, namely that for his disciples he arranged and adjusted what might be called apparatus and massage, divinely contriving mingling of certain diatonic, chromatic, and enharmonic melodies, through which he easily switched and circulated the passions of the soul in a contrary direction, whenever they had accumulated recently, irrationally or clandestinely, such as sorrow, rage, pity, over-emulation, fear, manifold desires, angers, appetites, pride, collapses, or spasms. Each of those he corrected by the use of virtue, attempering them through appropriate melodies, as if through some salutary medicine. In the evening, likewise, when his disciples were retiring to sleep, he would thus liberate them from the day's perturbations and tumults, purifying their intellective powers from the inflexive and inflexive waves of corporeal nature, quieting their sleep and rendering their dreams pleasing and prophetic. But when they arose again in the morning, he would free them from the night's logginess, coma, and torpor through certain particular chords and modulations, produced by either simply striking the lyre or adapting the voice. Not through instrument or physical voice organs did Pythagoras effect this, but by the employment of certain indescribable divinity, difficult of apprehension, through which he extended his powers of hearing, filling his intellect on the sublime symphonies of the world, he alone apparently hearing and grasping the universal harmony and consonance of the spheres, and the stars that are moved through them, producing the melody fuller and more intensive than anything affected by mortal sounds. This melody was also the result of dissimilar and varying sounds, speeds, magnitudes, and intervals arranged with reference to each other in a certain musical ratio, producing a convoluted motion most musical if gentle. Excuse me. Irrigated, therefore, with this melody, his intellect ordered and exercised thereby, he would, to the best of his ability, exhibit certain symbols of these things to his disciples, especially through imitations thereof, through instruments or the physical organs of voice. For he conceived that of all the inhabitants of earth, by him alone were these mundane sounds understood and heard, as if coming from the central spring and root of nature. He therefore thought himself worthy to be taught, and to learn something about these celestial orbs, and to be assimilated to them by desire and imitation, inasmuch as his body alone had been well enough thereto conformed by the divinity who had given birth to him. As to other men, he thought they should be satisfied with looking to him and the gifts he possessed, and in being benefited and corrected through images and examples, in consequence of their inability truly to comprehend the first and genuine archetypes of things, just as to those who are unable to look intently at the sun, we contrive to show its eclipses in either the reflections of still water or in the melted pitch, or some smoked glass, well-burnished brazen mirror. We spare the weakness of their eyes, devised a method of representing light that is reflective, through less intensive than its archetype. To those who are interested in this sort of thing, this particular organization of Pythagoras' body, far finer than that of any other man, seems to be what Empedocles was obscurely driving at in his enigmatical enigmatical verses. Among the Pythagoreans was a man transcendent in knowledge, who possessed the most ample stores of intellectual wealth, and in most eminent degree assisted in the works of the wise. When he exalted all the powers of his intellect, he easily beheld everything as far as 10 or 20 ages of the human race. These words transcendent, he beheld every detail of all beings, and the wealth of intellect, and so on, describe as accurately as that all possible his peculiar and exceptionally accurate method of hearing, seeing, and understanding. Ooh. Chapter Tower, Pythagorean asceticism. I don't know what that means. Music, therefore, performed this Pythagorean adjustment. But another kind of purification of the discursive, I don't know what that means either. But another kind of purification of the discursive reason and also of the whole soul through various studies was effected by asceticism. He had a general notion that disciplines and studies should imply some form of labor, and therefore, like a legislator, he decreed trials of the most varied nature, punishments, and restraints by fire and sword for innate intemperance, or an ineradicable desire for possession, which the depraved could neither suffer nor sustain. Moreover, his intimates were ordered to abstain from all animal food and any other that are hostile to the reasoning power by impeding its genuine energies. On them he likewise enjoined suppression of speech and perfect silence, exercising them for years at a time in the subjugation of the tongue, while strenuously and assiduously investigating and ruminating over the most difficult theorems. Hence also he ordered them to abstain from wine, to be sparing in their food, to sleep little, and to cultivate an unstudied contempt of and hostility to fame, wealth, and the like. Unfeignedly to reverence those to whom reverence is due. Unfeignedly to reverence? Genuinely to exercise democratic assimilation and heartiness towards their fellows in age and towards their juniors courtesy, encouragement without envy. Moreover, Pythagoras is genuinely acknowledged to have been the inventor and legislator of friendship under its many various forms, such as universal amity of all towards all, of God towards men through their pity and scientific theories, piety, should it have been, or the mutual interrelation of teachings, or universally of the soul towards the body, and of the rational to the rational part, through philosophy and its underlying theories, or whether it be that of men towards each other, or citizens indeed through sound legislation, but of strangers through a correct physiology, or of the husband to the wife, or brothers and kindred through unperverted communion, or whether, in short, it be of all things towards all, and still farther, of certain irrational animals through justice, and a physical connection and association, or whether it be the pacification and conciliation of the body, which of itself is mortal, and of its latent conflicting powers through health and a temperate diet conformable to this, in imitation of the salubrious condition of the mundane elements. In short, Pythagoras procured his disciples the most appropriate converse with gods, both waking and sleeping, something which never occurs in a soul disturbed by anger, pain, or pleasure, and surely all the more by any base desire, or defiled by ignorance, which is the most noxious and unholy of all the rest. By all these inventions, therefore, he divinely purified and healed the soul, resuscitating and saving it diving part. And saving it diving part? Diving? Okay, I don't understand that sentence. And directing to the intelligible its divine eye, which, as Plato says, is more worth saving than 10,000 corporeal eyes. For when it is strengthened and clarified by appropriate aids, when we look through this, we perceive the truth about all things. In this particular respect, therefore, Pythagoras purified the discursive power of the soul. This is the practical form that erudition took with him, and such are the objects of his interest. Chapter 7, Tests of Pythagorean Initiation. As he therefore thus prepared his disciples for culture, he did not immediately receive as an associate any who came to him for that purpose until he had tested them and examined them judiciously. To begin with, he inquired about their relation to their parents and kinsfolk. Next, he surveyed their laughter, speech, or silence as to whether it was unreasonable, further about their desires, their associates, their conversation, how they employed their leisure, and what were the subjects of their joy or grief. He observed their form, their gait, and the whole motives of their body. He considered their frame's natural indications physiognomically, rating them as visible exponents of the invisible tendencies of the soul. However, subjugating a candidate to such trials, after subjugating, he allowed him to be neglected for 3 years, still covertly observing his disposition towards stability and genuine studiousness, and whether he was sufficiently averse to glory and ready to despise popular honors. After this, the candidate was compelled to observe silence for 5 years, so as to have made definite experiments in continence of speech, inasmuch as the subjugation of the tongue is the most difficult of all victories, as has indeed been unfolded by those who have instituted the mysteries. During this probation, however, the property of each was disposed of in common, being committed to trustees who were called politicians, economers, or legislators. Of these probationers, after the quinquennial 5-year silence, those who by modest dignity had won his approval as worthy to share in his doctrines then became esoterics, and within the veil heard and saw Pythagoras. Prior to this, they participated in his words through the hearing alone, without seeing him who remained within the veil, and themselves offering to him a specimen of their manners. If rejected, they were given the double of the wealth they had brought, but the auditors raised to him a tomb, as if they were dead, the disciples being generally called auditors. Damn, son. I'll pay you to leave. Should these later happen to meet the rejected candidate, they would treat him as a stronger, declaring that he whom they had by education modeled had died, inasmuch as the object of these disciplines had been to be turned out good and honest men. I don't even know what that sentence is. I don't know how I should have read that. Should these later happen to meet the rejected candidate, they would treat him as a stronger, declaring that he whom they had by education modeled had died, inasmuch as the object of their disciples had been to be turned out good and honest men. Yeah, wow, I'm gonna have to call some friends and talk about this whole paragraph sentence. What the fuck's going on there? Those who were slow in the acquisition of knowledge, such as myself, were considered to be badly organized, or we may say, deficient and sterile. Well, that's not me. If, however, after Pythagoras had studied them physiognomically, their gait, motions, and state of health, he conceived good hopes of them, and if, after the 5-year silence and the emotions and initiations from so many disciples, together with the ab- ab- ablutions of the soul, and so many and so great purifications produced by such various theorems, through which sagesy and sanctity is ingrained into the soul, if, after all this even, someone is found to be still sluggish and dull, they would raise to such a candidate within the school a pillar or monument, such as was said to have been done to Perialus the Thurian and Cylon, the prince of the Cybertes, who were rejected. They expelled him from the auditorium, loading him down with silver and gold. His wealth had by them been deposited in common in the care of certain custodians, aptly called economics. Should any of the Pythagoreans later meet with the reject, they did not recognize him whom they accounted dead. Hence also Lysis, blaming a certain Hipparchus for having revealed the Pythagorean doctrines to the profane, and to such as accepted them without disciplines or theory, said, "It is reported that you philosophize indiscriminately and publicly, which is opposed to the customs of Pythagoras. With assiduity you did indeed learn them, O Hipparchus, but you have not preserved them, my dear fellow. You have tasted Sicilian tidbits, which you should not have repeated. If you give them up, I shall be delighted, but if you do not, you will to me be dead, for it would be pious to recall the human and divine precepts of Pythagoras, and not to communicate the treasures of wisdom to those who have not purified their souls even in a dream. It is unlawful to give away things obtained with labors so great and with assiduity so diligently to the first person you meet, quite as much as to divulge the mysteries of the Eleusinian goddess to the profane. Either thing would be unjust and impious. We should consider how long a time was needed to efface the stains that had insinuated themselves into our breasts before we became worthy to receive the doctrines of Pythagoras. Unless the dyers previously purified the garments in which they wished the desired colors to be fixed, the dye would either fade or be washed away entirely. Similarly, that divine man prepared the souls of lovers of philosophy so that they might not disappoint him in any of those beautiful qualities which he hoped they would possess. He did not impart spurious doctrines, nor stratagems in which most of the sophists who are at leisure for no good purpose entangle young men, but his knowledge of things human and divine was scientific. These sophists, however, use his doctrines as a mere pretext to commit dreadful atrocities, sweeping the youths away as in a dragnet, most disgracefully making their auditors become rash nuances. They infuse theorems and divine doctrines into hearts whose manners are confused and agitated, just as if pure clear water should be poured into a deep well full of mud, which would stir up the sediment and destroy the clearness of the water. Such a mutual misfortune occurs between such teachers and disciplines. The intellect and heart of those whose initiation has not proceeded by disciplines are surrounded lay thickets dense and thorny, which obscure the mild, tranquil, and reasoning power of the soul, and impede the development and elevation of the intellective part. These thickets are produced by intemperance and avarice, both of which are prolific. Intemperance produces lawless marriages, lusts, intoxications, unnatural enjoyments, and passionate impulses which drive headlong into pits and abysses. The unbridling of desires has removed the barriers against incest with even mothers or daughters, and just as a tyrant would violate city regulations or country's laws with their hands bound behind them like slaves, they have been dragged into the depths of degradation. On the other hand, avarice produces rapine, robbery, parricide, sacrilege, sorcery, and kindred evils. Such being the case, these surrounding thickets, infested with passions, will have to be cleared out with systematic disciplines, excuse me, as if with fire and sword. And when the reason will have been liberated from so many and great evils, we are in a position to offer to it and implant within it something useful and good. End quote. Damn. So great and necessary was the attention which, according to Pythagoras, should be paid to disciplines as introductions to philosophy. Moreover, inasmuch as he devoted so much care to the examination of the mental attitudes of prospective disciplines, he insisted that the teachings and communication of his doctrines should be distinguished by great honor. What did we start on? 14. So, I started on 15, 16. So. All right, that's 3 chapters. Y'all just gonna have to wait. Y'all just gonna have to practice some patience. Not 5 years, maybe more like less time than that.